Alright, this video here we're going to look at graphing the cosine function. Alright, so here's the basic cosine function, y equals cosine x, and we know that the period of the cosine function is 2 pi. And so we would look at graphing from 0 to 2 pi. Okay, that's where our interval starts and this is where our interval ends. Okay, this is over one period. And we break this interval up. Okay, from the starting and ending point of the period, we break this interval up into 4 equal intervals. And so basically to get this pi here, we're taking the midpoint of 0 and 2 pi. And then we would need the midpoint between 0 and pi, which is pi over 2, and then the midpoint of between pi and 2 pi, that would give us the 3 pi over 2. And then we have our max and min values. And I'm going to show you how to find all that as we're working the examples. But the thing that you need to remember with the cosine function is, see, here's the starting point for the period. And cosine always starts out at its maximum. And then it goes to 0, and then it goes to its minimum, and then it goes back to 0, and then back to its maximum. And it's going to work like that every time with cosine. Okay, but once you get these values here, that's why we're getting the values like we are, because then we know cosine is max, 0, min, 0, max. Alright, so let's take a look at our first example. And so we want to graph this over one period, y equals cosine 3x. Alright, so the way that we want to graph it is whatever we're taking the cosine of, in this case 3x, we want to set up an inequality. Okay, so we want to, whatever we're taking the cosine of, we want to put that between 0 and 2 pi. That's every time. The 0 and the 2 pi, it's going to be the same every single time. And then this, what goes in between them, is whatever we're taking the cosine of. Alright, and then all we do is we solve for x. So here we would divide everything by 3. And so I get 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 2 pi over 3. Alright, so what this does is this gives us the starting and ending point of our period. Okay, so we'll go ahead and draw that. And so we'll label it 0 and 2 pi over 3. And then we break it up into 4 equal intervals. Or, well, I guess what we can do before we do that is get our maximum and minimum value. We get that from the number in front of the cosine. So the number in front is 1. So we know our maximum value would be 1 and our minimum value would be -1. Now let's break this up into 4 intervals. So I need the midpoint here, so I'm going to add these two up. Okay, so I've got 0 plus 2 pi over 3, which is 2 pi over 3, and then I have to half it. So I can either divide by 2, multiply by half, same thing. So I've got 2 pi over 3 times 1/2. The 2's cancel, and you can see I'm left with pi over 3. So this would be pi over 3. Now I need the midpoint between 0 and pi over 3. So I add them up. 0 plus pi over 3 is equal to pi over 3. And then I half the pi over 3. So I multiply it by half, and that equals pi over 6. So there's pi over 6. And then I need the midpoint here, so I add up the pi over 3 and the 2 pi over 3. So pi over 3 plus 2 pi over 3 that's going to be 3 pi over 3, which is just pi. And then I take the pi, multiply it by half, and so I get pi over 2. And so this would be pi over 2. Alright, so now we're ready to sketch our graph in there. Alright, so remember, cosine, it's starting at 0 and going to 2 pi over 3. See, starting at 0, going to 2 pi over 3. So remember, cosine starts at its maximum, goes to 0, and then it goes to its minimum, goes back to 0, and then goes back to its maximum. Okay, and so cosine is going to look something like that. Alright, let's take a look at another one. Alright, here we have y equals cosine of x plus pi over 6. So let's go ahead and set up our inequalities. 0 less than or equal to x plus pi over 6 less than or equal to 2 pi. Alright, so there's our inequality. Remember, whatever we're taking the cosine of, the x plus pi over 6, that goes between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so let's solve. So I'm going to subtract pi over 6 to everything. And so that's going to give me negative pi over 6 less than or equal to x less than or equal to, and that will be 11 pi over 6, I believe. Yep. Alright, so let's draw our x-axis, and let's mark off the negative pi over 6 and the 11 pi over 6. Now notice I didn't draw in my y-axis because, where's it going to go? Okay, is it going to go here or over here more? So whenever you have a endpoint, when your endpoints are on opposite sides like this, one's negative, one's positive, I would just draw this, get my intervals, and then draw in the y-axis. Alright, so let's get the midpoint. We need this midpoint here, so we're going to add these up. So negative pi over 6 plus 11 pi over 6, that's 10 pi over 6. And then if we take the 10 pi over 6, we have to half it. And so that's going to leave me with 5 pi over 6. So that's 5 pi over 6. And then I need the midpoint here. So that's going to be negative pi over 6 plus 5 pi over 6. Okay, see that? Add this and this to give me that midpoint. So that's going to be 4 pi over 6. And, well, I guess we can go ahead and reduce it. That's 2 pi over 3. And then I take the 2 pi over 3, multiply it by half, and that's going to give me just pi over 3. See, the 2's would cancel. So that's pi over 3. And so you can see our y-axis is going to be about right in there. And then I need the midpoint here, so that's 5 pi over 6 plus 11 pi over 6, which is 16 pi over 6. And so that would be what, 8 pi over 3 once we reduce. And then I've got the 8 pi over 3 times 1/2, and that's going to give me 4 pi over 3. So that's 4 pi over 3. Alright, now I need my max and min value. So you can see that the number in front is 1. So we know it's going to be 1 and negative 1. Alright, so remember where the cosine starts. See, we're going from negative pi over 6 to 11 pi over 6. So where we start, cosine starts out at a maximum, and then the next point it goes to 0, and then it goes to a minimum, and then it goes to 0, and then back to its maximum. And so our graph is going to look something like that. Alright, let's take a look at another one. We have well, and before we go to the next problem, I want to go back and say one thing. Now, I'm graphing over one period. Okay, you may have to graph over 2 periods. If that's the case, let me just show you this real quick. The first thing you need to do would be to get the length of this period. So what I would do is I would take the end of the period minus the beginning of the period, okay, or the interval. So I would do 11 pi over 6 minus negative pi over 6. Okay, you subtract them, and that's going to give me what, 12 pi? Is that right? 12 pi over 6, which would be 2 pi. Okay, so that's the length of the period, 2 pi. So to get my next one, if I wanted to do another period, I could come out this way. I would need to come over 2 pi. So I would subtract 2 pi. So I would have negative pi over 6 minus 2 pi. And so that would be what? Negative 13 pi over 6. So that would be about right here, negative 13 pi over 6. And then you would just break this up into 4 equal intervals just like I did here. Okay. If you wanted to go the other way with it, you would just do the 11 pi over 6 plus 2 pi. You would go 2 pi units to the right, and then you would mark that off and break it up. Okay. So I mean, I'm just showing you over one period, but you can graph them over more than one. Alright, so let's go ahead and go to this one. Alright, so remember, whatever we're taking the cosine of, we're going to put between 0 and 2 pi. Alright, so let's see. I'm going to add the pi over 4 to everything. So that's going to give me pi over 4 less than or equal to 1/2 x less than or equal to, let's see, that's going to be what, 9 pi over 4. And then I need to get rid of the 1/2, so I'll multiply everything by 2. That'll cancel that 1/2 out. So multiply each one by 2, so that's going to be pi over 2 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 9 pi over 2. So there's the interval that we're graphing it over. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to erase this up here, and I'm going to rewrite that interval up there so I can, so I'll have more room to do my work down here. So that's what, pi over 2 to 9 pi over 2. Alright, so let's go ahead and draw our xy in there. And I'm going from pi over 2 to 9 pi over 2. And then my largest and smallest value, well, I've got a negative 1/2. Well, we know the amplitude is the absolute value of that, which would be 1/2. So I know my largest value would be 1/2. My smallest value would be negative 1/2. Alright, so let's break this up. So I need the midpoint here. Break it up into 4 equal intervals. So I've got pi over 2 plus 9 pi over 2. That is equal to 10 pi over 2. And then I take the 10 pi over 2 and I multiply it times 1/2, and that will give me 5 pi over 2. So that would be 5 pi over 2. Alright, and then I've got pi over 2 plus 5 pi over 2, which is 6 pi over 2. And so 6 pi over 2 is just 3 pi. Multiply that by 1/2, and that's just 3 pi over 2. And then I need the midpoint here. Well, 5 pi over 2 plus 9 pi over 2 is 14 pi over 2. So 14 pi over 2 is just 7 pi. Multiply that by 1/2, so that would give me 7 pi over 2. So that would be 7 pi over 2. Alright, now remember, we're starting at pi over 2 and we're ending at 9 pi over 2. So remember, cosine starts out at its maximum, but in this problem I have a negative in front. So instead of starting off at its maximum, because of the negative in front of cosine, it's going to go to its minimum. And then we'll go to 0, and then remember, it goes to its minimum, but since we have a negative in front, that would be a maximum, and then 0, And then here, remember it goes max, 0, min, 0, max. But because of the negative in front, we're going to be down here at the minimum. And so my graph, it looks something like that. Alright, so now let's take a look at this one. This is our last one. So I've got 1 minus 2 cosine x minus pi over 3. Alright, so in this problem, notice we have something out here. We have this 1, this plus 1 here. Well, right now, don't even worry about it. Just look at the negative 2 cosine of x minus pi over 3. That's all we're going to worry about right now. Okay? We're not even going to worry about the 1 right now. Alright, so just like we did in all the other in all the other problems, whatever we're taking the cosine of, we're putting that between 0 and 2 pi. And then we're going to solve. So we're going to add pi over 3. Add pi over 3 to everything. And so that's going to give me pi over 3 less than or equal to x less than or equal to, what is that, 7 pi over 3. Alright, so let's go ahead and mark that off. So we have pi over 3 and we have 7 pi over 3. Alright, so my amplitude is 2. Okay, I'm not even worrying about the 1 right now. So I know it'll be 2 and negative 2. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And you'll see in a minute why I marked it off like that. It's because of that plus 1. You'll see in a little bit. Alright, so now let's get the midpoint here. So I'm going to add them. So I've got pi over 3 plus 7 pi over 3. That is equal to 8 pi over 3. And then I'm going to take the 8 pi over 3, multiply it by half. So that's going to give me 4 pi over 3. So that's 4 pi over 3. And then I have pi over 3 plus 4 pi over 3 to get this midpoint. That's what? 5 pi over 3. Multiply that times a half, so that's 5 pi over 6. So that would be 5 pi over 6. And then here I have 4 pi over 3 plus 7 pi over 3. That would give me 11 pi over 3. Multiply that times a half, so that's going to give me 11 pi over 6. So that's 11 pi over 6. Alright, now watch this. Let's see, we've got, this is negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, 1, 2, 3. Alright, so still we're not worried about the 1. Okay, we're not worried about the 1. So I've got negative 2 cosine x minus pi over 3. Okay, so here's where I'm starting. Cosine starts out at its maximum, but since I have a negative in front, see the negative 2, it's going to its minimum. But then I'm adding 1. Okay, so all we look at right now is the negative 2 cosine x minus pi over 3. That's all I'm looking at right now. Okay, so since it's a negative in front, it's going to its minimum, but then I'm adding this 1 here. Okay, so I add the 1, so we're there. Okay, and then cosine goes to, it goes from its maximum, then it goes to 0. Okay, it goes to 0. And then I'm doing what? Adding 1. So it's going to be here at 1. And then, remember, negative 2 cosine x minus pi over 3, then it would go to its minimum, but since I have a negative in front, it's going to go to the maximum, which is 2. And then I'm adding this 1, so 2 plus 1, that's 3. And then it goes to 0, okay? And then I'm adding 1, okay? And then cosine, it ends with its maximum, but since there's a negative in front, it's going to go to its minimum, and then I'm going to add that 1. So negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1, and there's the graph, okay? So whenever you're adding something, like, see what that 1 did is it just shifted the graph up 1 unit, okay? So, I mean, all you do when you have something like that, just disregard it and just look at that and graph it and get your points, and then either add or subtract whatever that number is. You know, if it's plus, you're adding whatever that number is. If it's minus, then you're going to subtract whatever it is. Okay, and that's all there is to it. And I've got another video of sine. I'll probably get some tangent and, you know, maybe cosecant and a few with secant and cotangent too. But right now I've just got the sine and cosine. So hopefully these have helped. And, you know, and really the other trig functions, they're graph really similar to this. So hope you liked it. If you did, you can watch my other videos and subscribe. All right, thanks.